Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about customer lifetime value. In so many ways, 2020 was the year of new customer acquisition, of huge growth for e-commerce brands. And now that all of those customers have found their way to these stores and to these merchants, now it's about keeping them engaged and getting them to continue to shop, even perhaps once they can go back to more in-person shopping, or just in general, because they've found a healthy relationship. They've found a great place to shop, and they're pulled in a lot of directions. And so I've brought a guest that I think can really do a great job of speaking to this topic. We have Fiona with us today from the Loyalty Lion team. And with no further ado, Fiona, would you do the honor of introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks very much, Robert, for having me here today. I'm Fiona, Head of Marketing at Loyalty Lion. We're a data-driven loyalty and engagement platform, helping e-commerce brands use loyalty data and insights to power their marketing efforts as a whole. I've been with the company around 3 years, but I've been working in retail and e-commerce marketing for about 10 years, specializing in loyalty for the past 5. So hopefully I'm starting to know what I'm talking about.
Well, e-commerce is a trial by fire industry, that there aren't a ton of great courses or, programs out there that'll teach you everything you need to know, partly because it changes so fast. So it sounds like you've got just the right amount of expertise, as much as anyone really can have in the industry. So let's start off with, I already threw some spoilers out there as I described the episode, but how would you, from your own perspective, describe what changed in the e-commerce world in the last year or so? What is it that you think is really imperative for merchants to understand?
I think a lot changed, to be honest. I mean, a lot changed for everybody, but particularly in e-commerce. And it's been a very interesting space to occupy over the past 12 months. Well, more than 12 months now, because obviously for some people it's boomed. For some people, the opposite has been true. It hasn't been successful for everybody. But at the end of the day, the number of brands coming out. So we're in the age of Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, where people can build their own stores. They can sell on Amazon, they can sell on Etsy, they can sell on a million marketplaces. E-commerce has become so accessible and everybody is turning their hand to it. But that means as a brand, you've got so much competition all of a sudden. And exactly as you said before, on the flip side of that, there are more shoppers. Everybody that didn't shop online before now shops online, either because they can't go physically to the shops because the shops aren't open, or because actually they've just learned some new behaviors. And I think brands have seen those influxes of new customers, but now they need to find ways to retain them. You're never going to be able to acquire the same volume of customers as you did in 2020 with one campaign or anything like that. If you're someone like a activewear brand, for example, where nobody wore activewear during the day, and now everybody wears it 24 hours a day, that's a huge number of new customers you've got. You won't replicate that next year, for example.
But don't tell my coworkers that, that's between us, really.
It's okay. Nobody sees what trousers you're wearing on Zoom anyway. But I think people need to find ways to retain those new customers that they did get and make sure that they weren't just one-hit wonders. And I think actually the way people are shopping today is different as well. That has changed. It was already changing, but it's been accelerated. And price is not the be all and end all for a shopper anymore. It's now, we've got a bit more time to shop around. We've got more choice, and we want to know that the people we're shopping with align with what we believe in, or align with our values, or share our passions. I think people are making much more informed choices based on their own personal belief systems than they were before. So price it's not the most important thing anymore.
Well, and I'll add to that, as a shopper, there was a time when if you got to an e-commerce website, early on there was some novelty to it, but as you went, it took investment to really build an e-commerce site that was respectable. And so there was some leap of faith that it was almost like, if this business could pay the rent and open this nice looking store in the mall, they're probably all right, that they've got some things going for them. Now, you get all these businesses spinning up, $29 a month websites, and you don't know very much about them. You don't have a relationship with them. You don't know the brand very well, if at all. It's the same problem that I remember when I first got into digital marketing. We used to change some tags, add some content, build a few backlinks. and SEO rankings were on page one, and life was good.
If only it was still that easy.
Yeah. It was particular. It was so easy that we had a model in my early agency days of charging a 50% deposit and 50% when page one rankings appeared. And, for a certain number of keywords, certain specific keywords, things like that. And people weren't ready with the second half of the money. It was like, whoa, that was fast. They thought that they'd have a month or two or something. And, 3 weeks later, we're letting them, hey, we've achieved the results you were expecting. Now it goes into maintenance mode, but, we'll keep going after some more keywords, but there's, payment number 2 or 3 or whatever is going to come due, that we hit a milestone. And, today that's not how it works. Even things like running Google ads, that there's so much competition in some cases for the clicks. It's an auction system. It's a bid system. You're going up against others. I think that those sorts of things, certainly it makes it a little bit harder, maybe more than a little bit, for new entrants. But thinking about the businesses that are more established, that they have a working budget, that they can engineer their way past just being the same as everyone else and being the most basic, that that's where I see a lot of the challenge today. It's, we've got Amazon on the right, and we've got a million, tiny websites on the left. And how do we continue to thrive in the middle?
And honestly, I find it really interesting as a shopper myself. I find it absolutely fascinating, the different experiences you get from different things. So as you said, traditionally you would trust the brand that you knew because you'd seen their shiny shop front. Well, I'm in a situation at the moment where I've bought from 2 brands recently. One is I won't name names, but long established brand that everybody will know the name of. One is a mom and pop, just getting started. The communication from the smaller store has been fantastic. They've told me exactly which staff member is personally embroidering my jumper. They've told me that it won't be with me as soon as they hoped because of Brexit. They've told me this, they've told me that, but they're really keeping in touch. The other brand, which promised 7-day delivery, it's been 21 days and I've heard nothing from them, and I've chased them and I've heard nothing from their support team at all. So you can be the oldest in the business, but that customer experience from the smaller guys is often a lot better at the moment.
Yeah. I just want to imagine sitting in a restaurant right now, but imagine being in a restaurant and, you've been sitting there for 2 hours and your food hasn't arrived and no one's come to talk to you. I don't know if I would still be sitting there personally, but sometimes it's just that human touch. It's those extra little bits that it's not always about, very, very extensive technology, even.
No.
Good processes. No, that's great to hear. And I do see more and more of these up and coming SMBs really breaking through. And that's heartening, because what you don't want is a situation where Amazon, Walmart, Target, whomever else, right? All these big players just own the market, and it stifles new innovation and new competition. And so thinking about that, I know that you come from the loyalty world in recent years, and reward programs and things of that nature. I usually think of a lot of that as automation, as you set up the program and then it's just there, and people get their points, people redeem their points, things of that nature. What actually, have you seen bringing in the human touch through the loyalty channel? Are there things that really help to elevate that above and beyond just, the basic feature set, the basic plugin that, that just, does the baseline minimum in terms of being able to check the box and say, yeah, well, we have a program?
Absolutely, there is, yeah, and it's a topic quite close to my heart, actually, because I genuinely believe that a loyalty program can be a great way to get closer to your customers in quite a real and an authentic way. So I really love seeing brands using their loyalty programs to support and tell their brand story, for example. So a couple of examples, we have a big beauty brand who are all about sustainability. So they've built into their loyalty program, one of the ways that you can earn points is by recycling their packaging. So send off an old mascara wand or the bottle, and I don't know what you call mascara, and you would get 100 points in return. We also have a pet food brand. If you can redeem your points in return for a charitable donation to a dog shelter, for example. So, they're really using their program and customizing it in a way that tells their customers who they are and connects with the things that they're passionate about. And I think I also love to see brands creating communities of people who care about the same things. So we saw a lot of that in the pandemic. Obviously, people couldn't go into stores, so they started creating online communities full of content that really connected with customers on the things that they're passionate about. And I think the other thing I'd say on the human touch is connecting your loyalty program with your help desk. So if you've got customer support people who are talking directly to your customers, give them access to the loyalty data so that they can see how valuable these customers are, how many times have they shopped, and they can actually award them points in that scenario to sweeten a slightly sour situation. If you can connect your customer support and your loyalty program, then I don't think you can bring a more personal touch to it, really.
Yeah. You leave someone on hold for a half hour. There's nothing like throwing them some loyalty points to try to say, we're sorry. Please keep shopping with us. You matter to us. You count.
Yeah. Maybe try to keep it less than half an hour in the first place. But certainly, it's a good way of showing people that you value them.
Yeah. And is that particularly difficult integrating with, modern help desks, things like that? Or does that come down to some of the partnerships and like pre-built integrations?
It could do, yeah. So, for example, we integrate with Gorgeous, Reamaze, and Zendesk as examples, but you should be able to connect things up via API as well, I would have thought.
Interesting. So, that I'll have to remember next time I've got a customer service issue to ask if they can give me some points, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the more you know. It's funny, but I can recall having issues with airlines way back when. And I don't know, a long time ago, I thought I was smart. And I said, I don't need a voucher. Like, I don't know when I'm going to fly again. If I'll remember to use it. Can you just kick me some points? And they couldn't do it. And I tried this a few times, but the customer service reps really weren't empowered to provide points. They would have to give you some kind of a voucher that was non-transferable, that could only be used in this way and that way by this date and that. And,
sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. They couldn't give it to you on the spot. They had to mail it to you sometimes, and you'd hope that you'd get it. And, all sorts of things. It's like, no, just put the points in my account right here, right now. And I'll, so
yeah.
That stands out for me. How about creating customer tiers? Have you seen that really engaging from a loyalty program perspective, where maybe, they're new shoppers that just get their regular points and regular redemptions, but kind of like when you go through, I'll say American Express, if you have the green card, the gold card, or the platinum card, or the black or whatever, your points are worth more. Yeah. I know a lot of programs that have come about like that. Does that align with the e-commerce market?
1,000% it does. Yeah, we strongly encourage people to integrate tiers into their programs, because we know from research that we've done that customers love the feeling that they're working towards something. You love that aspirational feeling that you're building something up and that you're part of an exclusive tier. You're getting things that other people aren't. And also you're getting, the more you spend with the brand, you want to know you're getting more in return. So it's a great way of sort of communicating that value exchange. But I think the tiers actually also give you the opportunity as a merchant to explore more exclusive experiential type rewards. So a lot of our customers, as you move up their tiers, you get more VIP experiences, the things like early access to sales, or the opportunity to join a product tester panel, those kinds of things. And those are things that actually cost you very little as a business, but they provide enormous value to your most valuable customers in return. And I think those kinds of things, that experiential approach ties in really well with tiers, where you're trying to create that feeling of aspiration.
That's interesting. I tie a lot of it back to gamification, of course, that there are a lot of people that respond very, very well to that. So
we've got the Chive, one of our customers, they have an actual leaderboard live on their website. You can see yourself creep up the leaderboard. If you submit a photo review or something like that, you can literally see your movement in the loyalty tier.
Wow. All right. That's a new one for me. I'll try. I don't know exactly what they sell, but I'm going to avoid it because I'll be trying to get myself up that leaderboard. So, it sounds like you've seen some pretty interesting campaigns going on. I've asked some pointed questions. Are there other campaigns that you think are worth mentioning? Others that are doing this really well? Do strategies like gifting points to shoppers in order to re-engage them. Hey, we saw you haven't shopped in a while. Here's some points. Come on back and check out our new stuff. We want to make it easier than ever for you to come back and shop with us.
Yeah, 100%. I think gifting points in particular scenarios can be incredibly powerful. So, for example, if you take the time to figure out who's at risk, who is going to churn in the next X number of days if we don't get them back, you can separate those people out, and then you can send them, as you say, surprise and delight them with some additional points, which means that they will come back and make that next purchase. But I think it's less about perhaps gifting points and more about providing people with more opportunities to earn them that aren't purchases. So what you want to be doing is engaging with your customers in between the times when they shop and giving them points for other things like social shares or social likes and follows, leaving reviews, creating an account with you. There's loads of different positive activities that you can reward that sort of mean you're getting something in return for those extra points that you're gifting. And I think the other thing is to look at it as an alternative to discounting. So say, for example, I'm trying to think what the American equivalent is. Fall's coming up. People are going to be going back to school, back to college. You think, great, I'll do a back to school 20% discount store wide. That's quite costly for you. But if you flipped it on its head and said, hey, I'll do a back to school double points day. So anything you buy on that day, you'll earn double the loyalty points that you would have. In terms of marketing that promotion, you do it exactly the same way. You still put a banner on your site, you promote it on your social channels, It's exactly the same thing. It's just instead of discounting that sale, you're giving someone an opportunity to earn loads more points that's going to bring them back to make their next purchase far sooner. So I think there's some really clever ways that you can be giving points away, but in a way that is going to bring someone back for a longer term next purchase than just sort of getting them back through the door that one time.
That makes sense. Well, all about building the relationship. So, and thinking about that, I know that I've been really annoyed when I've had points expire. It's happened to me with hotels, airlines, car rental companies, all sorts of travel companies for sure. But I've had it happen with others as well in the e-com space and such. And, to some extent, when you get good reminders, maybe it draws you back in. But just like with a hotel, if I don't need it right then, if I don't have a purpose there, to be in one of your hotels, I hate to see this stuff go. It feels like you had something and you lost it. It was taken away. Have you seen circumstances where a loyalty program in some ways can do harm to consumer sentiment and to those relationships because people are frustrated in some way? Or maybe, I've certainly seen it where points were worth one thing and now they've been devalued. And so, you worked hard to earn them. And now, when you go to redeem them, they're not worth what you'd expect, what you had really earned in relative terms, because life is all about managing expectations, right? And so when your expectations are shattered, never healthy.
It's all about communication. I think there's two separate problems there. I think changing the value of points, it happens. We've seen it happen with some of the biggest loyalty programs in the UK. Sometimes things change, but the way you communicate it to your customers is absolutely essential. And they need to be really clear on, okay, things have changed, but I'm still going to get this value. There's very sensitive ways of doing it, which I've not seen many big brands doing well over the years. But I think the expiry point is very interesting. A loyalty program is not for every brand. It won't work if you don't have a high repeat purchase rate or a very repeatable product. And you could say that, yes, a hotel is that, but you'd have to dig into that customer's one data and say, well, how often have they booked? If they've booked once in 3 years, hotels and travel probably aren't their thing. So they're not the prime candidate for your loyalty program. They're not one of your most loyal customers or valuable customers anyway. So should you be spending the time and effort on re-engaging them? Probably not. So, I'd put it to you that if you've got customers whose points are expiring regularly, they're not that engaged and they may not be that valuable to you anyway. But I think it's probably a case of they're not clear on the value exchange. They haven't, it's either not clear to them how to use their points, or they're not understanding why it would be worth their while to use them.
Yeah.
So
I think from my perspective, one of the problems that I've found with it is maybe I was loyal to the brand, but I did some bookings through a third party and they didn't count. In the case of e-commerce, maybe I wound up making a purchase in store or somewhere else from the brand, because it was convenient, it was on the shelf somewhere. And now the points that I had accruing, online are going to get wiped out. I'm still loyal to the brand. It still has a little bit of a sting to it. I think that's some of the challenge from the brand perspective.
Yeah, and connecting those dots can be really difficult. And I don't think we're there yet as an industry on being able to do that omnichannel piece really, really well. But I think it's about making. Obviously, you want to encourage customers to shop from you and you alone as much as possible, and try and avoid those third parties. But I'm terrible for that. I'll book something on Booking.com and then think, oh, I should have done that. I should have gone, But I think it's about knowing who's really valuable to you, and that can be not just purchases. That can be, are they opening your emails? Are they referring? Have they used the referral link you gave them? Have they left you a review? Value comes in many different guises. But I think it's about preventing that expiry from becoming a problem. And that could be, as we said, segment the people that are close to that expiry date and then surprise and delight them with something that means they come back and they've got it's easier with e-commerce than travel, but, give them no choice but to want to spend it, or prompt them with some kind of surprise and delight, like, come and use your points before this date and we'll bump you up into that next tier and you'll get these exclusive benefits. I think it's really important to structure your program in a way that means customers can see the value they're going to get without having to work too hard. And if you're consistently getting customers too close to that expiry date, there's more likely a problem with your setup.
Yeah. In some ways, I've at one point thought about it like taxes, where tax rates go up and down. And so there are people that are really sensitive to that they want to, pay whatever it is at today's tax rate because they're afraid it's going to be more later, which is reasonable in a lot of situations. But I've seen myself rush to use points because I'm afraid of, that they're going to devalue, that they're not a good investment with some brands. Because there are too many changes to the programs. So,
I don't think we see that too much in
e-com quite as much.
It's because people operating loyalty programs successfully tend to be in that really, people are buying often. It's either replenishing your razor blades or your vitamin B tablets, or it's the kind of products that people buy repeatedly. That this works best for. So I don't think you have quite the same problem in the e-commerce space.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's just communication. You can change things around, but you've got to make it A, clear to your customers why you're doing it, and B, clear that they're not going to suffer for it.
Yeah. And speaking about clarity, I know that some programs, the math is a bit of a challenge. So it's not, 1 penny equals 1 point on the earnings and on the redemption, but that they have some other schemes involved. And, sometimes it can be difficult to even understand what you're really earning or how you're really going to be spending those points. Have you seen this done both well and poorly? Are there still people out there that are overcomplicating the point structure?
This is one of my biggest bugbears, actually. I'll try not to get too heated, but it does not have to be that complicated. And we have a legacy problem in this space that we've inherited from big brands who started loyalty programs in the first place. So in the UK, it would be people like the Nectar program, the Boots Advantage card. To be honest, all the airlines, British Airways, Avios, all that stuff. They made loyalty programs. And the credit card companies, the credit card companies. Yeah. Exactly. They made loyalty programs feel like that it's too complicated to use it for a start. when you do use it, you don't get enough in return. And it leaves you feeling the opposite of a valued customer over time. So I think it's very much a legacy problem that has harmed loyalty program engagement. And we're still working really hard to make people realize that actually these e-commerce stores, it is worth you taking the time to create an account. It is worth you collecting points because you will get something in return. So I think, it's important to keep it as simple as you can, but also to communicate it really clearly. So a lot of our merchants have FAQ style pages as part of their loyalty program that makes it really obvious. You spend this, you'll get this in return. And I think as well, as we're seeing people move towards these experience-based rewards, the value, the points to pounds or points to dollars ratio becomes slightly less important anyway, because they're seeing that they're getting valued in other ways. But I think in some ways, it's less about the actual value of a pound or a dollar in terms of a point. And it's more about how long is it going to take someone to build up enough points to claim a reward, a good reward that's actually going to be worth their time. If that's too long, then you've got a problem with your program. You want it to be, the first time someone engages, they need to be able to earn enough points almost that they could get a reward almost straight away and come back the second time. Then you can start spacing it out a bit more. But I think that's absolutely
that would be things like giving them those opportunities, get points for subscribing to social media, get points for subscribing to the newsletter, for creating an account instead of just shopping as a guest, things like that, maybe for leaving a review. So if they add it up with their purchase, maybe, they, as a new customer, as a welcome, something like that.
Exactly. And, then they've almost got enough to get some money off their second purchase already. And all of the actions that they're taking will benefit you in the long run. If they create an account, sure, yes, you give them 200 points, but you can then market to them. You can keep contacting them. If they follow you on social media, yes, you've got to give them 200 points, but you can reach them with all of your marketing messaging, all of your promotions, all of your great user-generated content that's going onto your social channels. Each of those activities is actually going to benefit your marketing long term. So
that makes sense. And I know that earlier in the episode we described giving users, instead of 20% off the whole store for the full sale, giving them points instead. Do you see merchants that do a good job of offering points, let's say bonus points or extra points for specific purchases because there are things that they want to close out or specific merchandise that they're incentivized to move, where they vary the program a little bit more without overcomplicating, but they really use it as more of the strategy that, the emails go out, hey, double points on these categories, this week only, things like that, where it is more strategic about what they really want to sell, where their margins are stronger, or some other, where they think that it's a teaser product and, people, even if it's a loss leader, people aren't going to buy that without buying 5 other things anyway.
I'd actually love to see more of that. And I think it's a symptom of the fact that loyalty programs often sit in silos or they're a bit more isolated. I mean, they should be connected to every facet. So someone in the merchandising team should know that they're struggling to shift some stock. Okay, let's talk to the loyalty guys, connect the dots, and hey, we can shift that stuff. We'll, as you say, offer additional points on it, or we'll use it as maybe, if you've got stuff that you literally can't give away, you could be using that as free product rewards, things like that. There's absolutely ways to do it. And I think double points on particular products that you're trying to either shift, like perhaps get rid of, but also perhaps just promote, they haven't had their time in the sun and you want to get them out them more. Offer extra points on them. But we don't see it happening often enough, which I suspect means that there are other teams out there who deal with the products that aren't connected to the marketing side and the loyalty side.
There's someone in merchandising or, there's someone in the team that knows that if we could just get more people to try this new product, they'd order it again month after month, and that this should be part of the strategy. But especially for the loyalty program, for your best shoppers that come back, get them to add this to the cart each time. They just need to try it once and they'll be hooked. I'm with you there, that I haven't seen quite enough of that. And I've almost been surprised that that hasn't become a little bit more prevalent. than it is.
Yeah.
And speaking about some of the messaging, I noticed on your site we talked about integrations with some of the ticketing systems and help desks, but I noticed integrations with a lot of the major email marketing platforms, Klaviyo, Omnisend, Dot Digital. I imagine that your team, from an engineering standpoint, is perfectly capable of sending out emails. Why has your team focused on integration with these third parties? Is it because that's a way to get these marketers to actually be able to pull these pieces together?
I think it's partly that. It's a few things. First of all, we know that people want personalized emails now. Nobody wants to see a stock standard marketing message. And if you can integrate loyalty data into your emails, that's what you get, completely personalized message. No one else has the same points balance as you. No one else has the same a reward available at the same time as you do. That's completely unique to you as a shopper. So if you can integrate that kind of loyalty data into your email strategy, your open rates, your click-through rates, everything's going to increase. So it's really about using your loyalty program to add more power to the email marketing that you're already doing. And then in terms of it just with the integration, something like Klaviyo, where you have different events and different things that trigger behaviors. Again, if you can tie that into your loyalty program, for example, if somebody purchases, you can have a loyalty email triggered X number of hours, minutes, days later that says, hey, you can earn this many points if you come back and leave a review. Or if you come back and make a referral. It's those triggers are already set up in Klaviyo, but you could be using them to power your loyalty and vice versa as well. So it's more about consolidating things, bringing your strategies together and using loyalty insights and loyalty data to make them more powerful.
That certainly makes sense. For me, I published an article on the JetRails blog recently talking about where to host your emails. And there's transactional emails, and there's marketing emails, and there's corporate emails, and there's different things. And as an e-commerce brand, you've got to be thinking about all of it, and there should be a strategy behind it. And in a lot of cases, things like transactional emails that can be very blasé, when you pull them into a system that allows for personalization and better tracking and other things, that you've got more tools at your disposal to delight customers and to really go above and beyond, there's a benefit. So I didn't probably touch very much on loyalty and rewards as part of that, but absolutely, that all of those key integrations become important. And if I didn't before, now I've got another one in my head.
But it's the automation piece as well. That's, again, it's a loyalty program shouldn't be an extra thing on your to-do list that you're worrying about. It should be something that's connected with all of your marketing. So if you can set these loyalty emails up as automated things that are triggered by other things, then you're in a much more powerful place than if you're just trying to run several different activities separately.
Yeah. And the other category that I saw on your site had to do with subscriptions. And obviously, as a merchant, there's nothing better than getting someone into an automatically renewing subscription for product. Having those recurring payments coming in is lovely. Is that something that we're just scratching the surface at, or a lot of brands doing a good job of particularly promoting that through their reward programs? Are there challenges around it? How do you look at that from your vantage point?
I think the first thing I'd say is don't be fooled. A subscriber is not necessarily a loyal customer at all. So I can't remember the exact stats, but it's something people have up to 7 subscriptions. And if you think about it, it's the first thing that goes when you want to cut back. You look at all the subscriptions you have and you take out the gym club, or you probably keep Netflix, but you might take out Disney Plus. It's the first thing to go. And also, people are too distracted by special offers. So again, say you have Gusto and HelloFresh, both meal delivery things. People literally, and I know because I do it myself, and I know many other people do too, they bounce between the two because they get 20% off 3 boxes over here. Then 2 months later, they see 20% off 3 boxes with the other provider. So they switch to them, and they go backwards and forwards between people who are offering the same things, but whoever's got the best special offer. So you may have a subscriber, but unless you've got them signed into a year-long contract, you do not necessarily have their loyalty. That's a different thing. So I think you really have to work hard to retain those subscribers. And one of the ways we've seen people do that really well is with something called a subscriber tier. So again, it just takes the tier system that we talked about earlier, but make sure that if you're a subscriber, you get access to a whole different set of benefits that feel really exclusive that no one else can get. And you're getting that at no additional cost to yourself, just through staying subscribed. And the benefit there, essentially someone could send you an amazing special offer, but you'd say, okay, but I'm going to stay here because A, switching is a pain, it's admin. B, you're offering me a discount, but over here I'm getting all of these extra things that make actually this much more appealing than any discount you can offer me. Mm-hmm. So I think that use of subscriber tiers is playing a big part in retention, but subscriber doesn't equal loyal customer, unfortunately.
Now, here's the £1 million question. Can they use the reward points toward their active subscription, or do they have to purchase something else with those points that they've been accruing? How does that? Because I imagine that if you're on subscription, you're building up points and you're not logging in, you're not clicking anything to apply those points to anything. Now, what do you do with them? Is that potentially a challenge for some of those brands and some of those shoppers?
To be honest, it's up to you how you set up your program. So everyone will be a little bit different. But we see many people, you can put your points towards a recurring subscription and you can reuse them for the same.
Interesting. So you might just have to log in and clarify that on next month's order, please use, these points that have accrued.
Yeah, I imagine with some of the integrations that might even be automatic. I'm not entirely. Again, it depends how you're set up. But,
okay,
but certainly, it's not
if
about.
If it's not, your product team has a request in now. They might ask us to cut that bit before someone asks. No,
it's certainly about. It's not about getting subscribers. I mean, obviously, if you've got subscribers and they want to make additional purchases, even better. That's
fantastic,
an even greater place to be in. And yes, you do want to encourage that, but you also don't want to annoy your subscribers by them building up an enormous points balance they can't use. So there's a middle ground there.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, that goes back to my points are going to expire, or they're not worth what I thought they were. When it's too hard to use them, that certainly can become a challenge. And we touched on barely the topic of omnichannel, and I definitely wanted to swing back around to it, especially given the year that we just had, where people have been shopping in a more omnichannel fashion than a lot of them are used to. Buy online, pick up in store, curbside, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of movement there. People that were shopping in store might still or might return to it, but they're shopping online more frequently than they were, or just in general, they are for the first time, in the past year or so, and they've continued to do so. What are, from your perspective, some of the bigger challenges there? Is it that some of these stores have in-house loyalty programs that don't really mesh with the online programs, that they almost have two different teams running two different programs? Is it that they're using legacy point of sale that can't support any loyalty program? I imagine it's probably a little bit of, column A, column B, and maybe just a few other columns. But
just a few.
Yeah, how is omnichannel fitting in? Because I would think that there's been a lot of growth in e-com, specifically for some of these established brands that might have already had some loyalty, or whose customers are going to expect the loyalty programs to work in store and online.
It's a really good question. It depends. I mean, there's a lot of bigger businesses who have failed to do this well, and because, as you say, their POS doesn't work the way they need it to these days, and things like that. I think it's extremely important in terms of loyalty to be providing that omni-channel experience. A customer needs to know that they'll be able to either earn or use their points wherever they're shopping, whether it's online, in store. And the easiest way to do that is via your POS, whether it's native integration like Shopify, or it's an API, the two need to talk to each other so that as customer A, when I walk into the shop and I say I'm customer A, I can use my points that I've collected. That's, as shoppers, you should be able to expect that. It's important that people deliver that. I think what's been really interesting about COVID is actually watching people go the other way. So obviously everybody had to go online really quickly, but people actually started replicating their in-store experiences online really fast. So one of our clients, Wear Lively, they're an underwear brand, and they started doing virtual fittings and virtual styling sessions online for their most valuable customers during the pandemic. And I just thought, amen. That's what e-commerce should have been doing all of this time, is finding ways to replicate. I mean, it's what we do with product descriptions. That's essentially a in-store assistant telling you about the product. Reviews, that's essentially walking into the shop and being able to touch and feel the product. There's so many things that we do replicate online, from in-store. And it was interesting to see people pick up some of the other things with the pandemic and try and move them online. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating over the next few months to make that transition effectively.
Interesting. We've touched on a few ways that some of these programs can not work out as intended, that someone goes with best of intentions and launches some kind of a loyalty program. I know that there are platforms that have some very basic features caked in, like Magento Commerce has a reward point system built in. Are there any, at least any that we haven't touched on, any common themes that you've seen in programs that aren't an overwhelming success, where someone feels like either, they didn't do it well or it wasn't a good match? I mean, I imagine that there are categories where, as we've hit on it, if there aren't going to be frequent enough purchases, I usually pick on mattress stores, that how often are you replacing your mattresses? And therefore, programs like this could be difficult for those sorts of places, unless they're selling you new pillows every year, or, or sheets or bedding, or, something else that this isn't really going to go very far. But are there certain things that you see where, people tried it, they think that they gave it a go, but they really weren't set up for success in the first place?
100%. I think there's a few things at play there. Firstly, people would like to think that they can just click launch and the loyalty program will run itself. And unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a marketing activity. It needs marketing strategy. It needs attention. It needs to be managed. It needs to be run. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is that people think that they can just run it and it will operate by itself. And unfortunately, it just isn't. It should be treated like any other activity. It should be integrated. It should have its own strategy. I think the other thing is expecting results overnight. It's an interesting thing with SEO, for example. We've all been conditioned, probably by SEO agencies, but we've all been conditioned to know that you don't just go up in Google rankings overnight these days. You might have once, but now it's going to take a little bit more work, and then you'll see the traffic coming through, and we all expect that to take some time. Again, we plug in a loyalty program and expect it to work overnight, but actually you need time for people to come back and make those second and third and fourth purchases. You need time for people's lifetime value to build up. So it's not something that you're going to be able to say it tripled my revenue overnight. You need people to have time to come back and respend before you start seeing the results. And I think it's an interesting one. I actually spoke on a webinar earlier this week about the Asos loyalty program, because that's one that actually went live in 2015 and they axed it in 2018 because they said they didn't see enough really engaged customers. So we dug into that a bit further, and actually all they had done was this points for prizes. It was literally just points and then pounds or dollars in return. And even in their tier strategy, the only difference was, I think you got a very slightly different dollar amount back in return for your points than tier one. There was hardly any difference. And they hadn't put enough thought into different ways of engaging their customers. There was no other way to earn points. It was just purchases. So there was no way of communicating between times. There were no kind of experiential rewards that we talked about, no early access to sales, no first access to new products, queue jumps, all that sort of thing. And none of that going on. And then the tiers had no aspiration or exclusivity as a result. So, I mean, that's an example of one of the biggest, certainly fast fashion brands who did it and didn't invest enough in it and then reeled it back a few years later. So it definitely happens, but it definitely doesn't need to happen.
Interesting. you know, the old saying, if you live long enough, you'll see everything. I've seen programs come and go, and sometimes people just didn't give them long enough. So as you've described, it takes time to build up the point values with these shoppers to the point where there's enough there for them to really utilize and get excited about. And sometimes people have these misunderstandings about how people see the points and that's automatically gonna jump up the sales. That's something that we have that our competitors don't. There's, I think, some truth to that in some cases. Especially one of my favorite ways to use it was always brands that had manufacturer pricing that they needed to honor. They couldn't necessarily offer a discount, but they could really throw the points right on there for those products and say, look, and I'm sure that some brands may not be quite as friendly to it, but that printer, we have to sell it at this price, but we can give you lots of points back that you can use for other items, or we can, give you these free gifts with it. This swag with it, these other things. And at least it was different than what other websites had. So there's a lot of that. Often at the beginning of these episodes, I ask about the brand name. And as I was trying to decide whether to pronounce Clavio or Clavio, I realized that I hadn't asked you about that yet today. Now, loyalty's in the name loyalty line, so that part's obvious. But does there happen to be a good story behind the brand and how that name came to be?
Loyalty is not as obvious as you might think. I had to ask about this because although I must have been told the story several times in the last 3 years, it completely escaped me. So I was digging into this just before this call. So the story goes, it turns out that Charlie and Dave, our co-founders, were part of a startup bootcamp incubator in Berlin. And they were stuck, A, on the product and B, on the name. So they hadn't quite decided what the platform was going to do and what it was going to look like, and they couldn't think what to call it. So they used a website where people could suggest names, and they then got sent a shortlist. That's not the end of the story, don't worry. And while they were waiting for a list of names to come from that, a friend of theirs suggested Loyalty Line. But at that stage, they didn't actually know that the product was going to be definitely loyalty focused. So they disregarded it, picked a name from this list because they couldn't waste any more time on naming. They had to get going, So they ran with a different name. And then apparently a few months later, they just disliked it more and more as time went on. So one day, Dave, our CTO, essentially went online, bought loyaltyline.com and started replacing the name in the code base. And that was that. Loyalty Line became our name.
That's fantastic. So crowdsourced a name and then threw it back in, took it off the hook and said, nope, this
didn't like it. Well, that's the original. Yeah.
I've known very few people in my lifetime that have gone and legally changed their name because they didn't think it fit them well enough. But those people exist. I've certainly seen brands do it. I'm glad that they did it earlier on, perhaps when it's a bit easier before you've invested quite as much into brand recognition. But
and look, I think they didn't know at that point that loyalty was going to be 100% what they did, and
makes sense. Yeah,
and now we're in a position where loyalty is all we do. We're not a one-stop shop for lots of different things. We integrate with a lot of other tools, but we do that so that you can use your loyalty data and your loyalty insight to drive those tools better. We don't try and do a lot of different things. We just try and do loyalty really, really well. So actually, it's turned out to be the perfect name for us.
Absolutely. Well, I've certainly only thought good things about the brand through the years. And, with that, you've been really generous with your time and you've put up with me very, very graciously. Before we wrap it up, any final thoughts, anything that you think the audience should be aware of, any prognostications or things that we haven't touched on yet before we call it a day?
Well, good question. I think I'd just say don't be afraid of loyalty, or don't be afraid to invest time in it. I've kind of gone the other way with this podcast. Yes, it takes time and it takes investment. You have to have a strategy, etc. But that's not something to be afraid of. It actually fits into your day-to-day marketing probably better than you can imagine. And you don't have to be a big business to do it well. You could have 2 customers, but that means you've got 2 customers that could come back and spend again, who have a higher lifetime value than the next 2 customers that you're going to acquire from fresh. So, and they're also, 2 customers that could refer you or leave you a review. So however big you are, you can start thinking about loyalty really early.
Absolutely. Well, it can be a lot more cost effective to take good care of the customers you've already gotten across your threshold than it is to have to onboard new ones. That cost of acquisition can be high. So I'm on board. Well, Fiona, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And to our listeners, as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy selling out there.